So I'd like to welcome everybody to the 14th meeting of the 46th year of the Rotary Club of Dublin and Worthington. Today's invocation will be by George Norris, who I think is on, correct? I'm missing George. Did anyone take George's place?
Is Tom Rice on? Pastor Tom?
No, he is not. So,
if you wait just a second.
Jerry's always prepared.
If you'll take an attitude of prayer, please. To a supreme being we pray. It is so simple to help others, to make their life better. Help us to not make it difficult, but to do it because we can. To this, we all say, Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. Go Bucks.
Being Veterans Day, I think we need to at least recognize those who have served. And if you have, could you please raise your hand if you've served in any of the services? Thank you. Thank you for your service. It is an honor to have fine members who have taken the time and dedication to provide service to our country. Thank you very much. At this point, the President-elect Steve will recognize and do any visitors, with the exception of the speaker, who will be introduced a little later. Also take any happy dollars or fines, etc. So,
yes. So today we do have one visitor, a visiting Rotarian, Wolf Lant. Let's try to do the one clap welcome. All right. So 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, Wolf. I don't believe we have any other guests aside from our speaker, who will be introduced a little bit later. So happy dollars. Give me 3. It's 10% of the club. Who wants
I have
to go?
one.
Go for it.
I have actually I have 10 happy dollars, 9 because I'm so pleased to be celebrating my 9th anniversary with Heather. We're so excited about that. And 1 in honor of my brother, who gave us 25 years in the Navy.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Oh, I have a happy dollar. At council on Monday, the Vision Community
I fixed it.
put the Worthington Vision forward to the public. It's starting to finalize the visioning process that's been going on for over a year. I know Don Motley has been a part of it, and everyone else has been a part of it. I'm so thankful that we're nearing the end, and I'm very happy about it.
That's awesome. Who else? I need one more. Come on. Something to be happy about.
Bro.
I already shared this, but I'm leaving tomorrow for Florida So I'm happy about that. I'm
Yeah.
hoping that this wedding is going to be able to go off without the hurricane.
Ro, you mean you're traveling? Isn't that
I am.
unusual? Isn't that unusual for you?
Very unusual for me, yes. Especially this year.
Thank you. Yeah, be safe.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's all I got. Back to you, Jim.
Okay. In terms of announcements, I think we have several today. Who would like to go first? Shirley, you need to unmute yourself.
Now it is. Okay. We have such a golden opportunity to do an online auction with Paula Moulton, Mike's wife. She's with Auction Ohio. It's on Worthington Galena Road, and she is going to be our advisor and help us set it up. But as far as donations this year, we're going to have some different opportunities to donate some things. And I asked her for suggestions, and here's what she said. A few suggestions: fine jewelry, costume jewelry, gold, silver, a used car, if even a golf cart I'll take, gift baskets, not clothing, tags or not, no new clothing, new perfume, chance to get rid of some of that perfume we got as gifts, cologne, small items with perceived value. So you will be getting an email with the logistics and how we're going to do this and the timeline we're going to need these donations and how we're going to pick them up. It would be too much for me to go into, and you won't remember anyway. So we're going to send you out an email, and we have to get moving on it because the closing for the donations will be the end of November because we have to get it on the auction for like 20 days. But the good news is we'll also have advantage of their 80,000 customers who bid on items. So we really need to come up with some great things to donate. And I hope that you'll come through like you always do for me, but you'll be getting that email soon.
Yeah, many of the items that you have donated in the past certainly apply,
Right.
with the exception of tobacco and alcohol. We
Right.
can't sell tobacco or alcohol over the internet. That just isn't going to work out.
Or lottery tickets.
We cannot sell. Did we get word back on that? No lottery tickets?
No, lottery tickets are okay.
Okay.
If you've purchased the lottery ticket, there's no problem with that. The state getting their money or share out of that because it's already happened.
Well, we were thinking like a gift, like 50 lottery tickets, things, a package thing. But yeah, we can take some bigger items this year. Not really furniture, but just kind of things you'd like to re-gift, and hopefully we can put some things in her warehouse and make some money.
Okay, next, who'd like to go next?
The food drive, as you well know, is off and running. Some of you have already volunteered. If you're of such a mind, please volunteer. You can do that through Andrew, and then the only other thing you need to do for that event is pray for good weather on the 21st.
We do need a fair number of volunteers, so please do sign up as soon as possible so we can get those slots filled. Dick, do you have an announcement? Need to unmute yourself, Dick. You need to unmute yourself. You're muted right now. There you go.
I'm on. Okay.
You're on now.
Okay, Rotarians. What time is it?
Poinsettia time.
Study time.
Yes.
Yes, it is poinsettia sales times. We do have a very short season. We're starting today and we end on December 2nd is the last day of sales because delivery is on December 9th. And of course, we have large, luscious, healthy poinsettias in regal red, winter white, princess pink, and creamy marble. So we need to get some sales. They're $12 a plant. If you buy them in groups of 10, they're $10 each or $100 for 10 plants. Delivery, again, will be on December 9th. We have committed to sell approximately 500 plants through Mike Moulton and through his. And they were very healthy last year. The people who got them thought they were great. With a little TLC, they'll last till Valentine's for you cheap guys that don't buy roses. So I think we got a good deal. It's going to be a different way of selling. I don't know how you folks are. You can go wandering around the countryside. I've moved to a Friendship Village and I have limited visit rights. I can't go into houses. I can't go into businesses. So all of my sales are going to be via the telephone or emails. Jim has set up the spreadsheets that we normally put on the tables are now via email. So for every sale, you can record the sale on email and we can get a total of it. So we can have a running total to see how we're doing. I will think most businesses would be willing to buy them, even if they don't have customers coming in the door. It would cheer up their employees who are still working in their offices or businesses. So remember, $12 a plant, start selling. Thanks. Questions?
We will be sending out in the next day or two both the link to the site that is actually on our website, where your name is listed and you simply list the number of plants and the total dollar-wise. And then we also will be sending you a flyer that you could send to friends, neighbors, relatives, business, that they can actually complete and then send it back to you. That isn't necessary for us, but helps with your ability to sell. So you will be getting that email the next day or two with the link. And the link is actually on our website. So
I have a couple announcements, Jim.
Okay, Wolf, you're 125. You had mentioned, yes.
Yes. First of all, November is the Rotary Foundation month. So consider promoting the Rotary Foundation, making donations to that, and doing it through Rotary Direct, which is an online way to automatically make contributions either monthly or annually to the Rotary Foundation. Remember, those contributions are matched for the polio project by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation 2-to-1. And also I would like to remind everyone that the registration is going on for the Taipei Rotary Convention in 2021. So hopefully some of you can join that. The District Fun event is on Zoom, November 12th at 7 p.m., which is tomorrow. Open to anybody in the district. It's just a fun get together to socialize and get to know each other a little bit better. And then the master class, the next master class is on fundraising, and that is coming up on November 17th at 5 p.m. So that's it for district announcements. I also have a 125 Club presentation, which it is my honor to do for one of your treasured club members and one of the important people in our district, Connie Hendren. We really appreciate your contribution to the 125 plan. Every day, Rotarians dream of big things, and our Rotary Foundation helps us make those dreams a reality. We dream of a polio-free world. Today, we're closer than ever with just 133 cases of wild polio worldwide in 2020. And unfortunately, we're actually backsliding a little bit. That is up from under 100 last year. We dream of peace. Our Rotary Foundation continues to fund studies in peace and conflict resolution. More than 1,000 graduates are out there making a difference in the most conflict-torn areas of the globe. Wherever there is war, poverty, hunger, illiteracy, or disease, Rotarians are there to help. We use our Rotary Foundation to bring hope to those who have none. It helps us feed the starving, heal the sick, battle illiteracy, provide a chance at self-reliance to those in abject poverty, and provide clean water that's more precious than gold. Connie Hendren becomes a member of the Rotary District 6690-125 Club for 2021 by having donated at least $100 to the Rotary Foundation Annual Fund and at least $25 to Polio Plus. Because of your generous support and from others like you who support the Rotary Foundation, those dreams are being realized. And I should note that Connie is a multi-year sponsor of the 125 Club. So thank you very much. On behalf of District Governor Steve Heiser and District 6690 Rotary Foundation Committee, I'd like to present you with your 125 pin for this year. And I will send that to you, Connie, since we can't do this in person. But thank you so much for your support, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Connie. Thank you, Wolf, for the presentation. Connie is definitely a leader both at the district and a local club that we all enjoy and feel great about. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you.
And now for the program today, Christy Bruffy will do the introduction. I'm looking. Christy? Yes. You need to turn yourself off, unmute, please. Thank you. Go ahead. Whoops. We still aren't getting.
Yeah, Christy, you're not muted, but we still can't hear you. Mm-mm. Well, given the circumstances, Mark, would you care to introduce? Mark Beaver?
Sure. Sorry, Christy, because I know Christy would do a better job than I would on this, but I'll do my best. Yes, our guest is Dave Foreman. He is from One Line Coffee. It's a coffee roaster here in Central Ohio, and you may or may not know that name. They have a couple of shops in town, and they also supply coffee for a lot of the coffee shops that you probably frequent on a regular basis. So I'll let Dave tell his story, how the company came to be and what they're up to. And he also wanted to share about the process of how coffee is farmed and how we can do a better job of sustainability in that. So without further ado, Dave, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. And Christy, I'm sorry that you didn't get to say anything. Christy's been one of our customers for the last, I want to say 4 years, 4.5 years now, right? Almost 5. I can't see your hand. Hold your hand up a little higher. 5, it is 5 years. Yeah, I think it'll be 5 years in January or February, one of the two. At any rate, Christy, of course, is the owner of Highline Coffee over there on High Street. And, we've been working with her from the beginning, and she's one of our best customers. I think she does a great job. But So I'm one of the owners of One Line Coffee. We are actually a family business. We started, myself and my dad started working together way back in 2003. So I've been in this game for almost 20 years now. Our first store is called River Road Coffee House. Some of you guys might be familiar with it. It's out in Granville, Ohio. That's actually where I graduated from high school more years ago than I care to admit. But we opened up out there. At the time, we were not roasting coffee. We were just in retail. As we kind of grew that initial store, we ended up opening up a second. And in 2009, we actually started roasting coffee. And that's when we launched One Line Coffee. Since then, we've continued to grow. Oh, my daughter's coming into the room. Hi. Sorry about that. So we started roasting coffee in 2009, launched One Line. Since then, we've actually opened up 2 One Line stores in Columbus, one down in the short north and one in Franklinton. But despite kind of our retail work, really as a company, we're focused on wholesale. So what we do is we work to help other people be successful and help other people actually open up their own shops and their own stores and be successful entrepreneurs and successful business people. So that's kind of where our focus has been. What I kind of wanted to accomplish today is just kind of have this be a little bit informal. So I'd love to have kind of a conversation and allow you guys to ask questions or anything that you wanted to know about coffee, but maybe you just didn't have the right person to ask. So feel free in the chat if you guys want to type in any questions that you may have. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what our focus is with farmers and our producers. And then I'll kind of keep an eye on the chat and any questions that pop up, I'm happy to answer. So 5 years in October, it was October. I couldn't remember. I remember coming to your grand opening right after I think I got back from maybe Ethiopia, and I couldn't remember what month that was. At any rate, oh, that was in February. That's right. Grand opening. Correct. So the biggest thing that I like to talk to people about, and one of the biggest things that we do is we really focus on transparency. We kind of feel like as roasters that although people tend to associate quality or associate a particular flavor, profile with a roaster, most of the work that we do is dependent 100% on what a farmer is doing or what a farmer is actually producing. We can't take coffee that is bad and make it any better. But we can take coffee that's really good and we can make it and roast it as best we can and share that story. And so that's what we focus on. All of our coffees are coming from a single farm or a single community or a single cooperative. And the idea behind that is to kind of share the work that they've done. Another thing that I like to talk to people about is the fact that our producers, even though a lot of times they are in second and third world countries, they're not a lot different than we are. I've got some pictures that I'll share with you guys shortly here, but realistically, farmers are farmers across the world. They all want to do a good job, and especially in coffee where there's definitely a quality component, it's not a commodity. People are even more passionate about the crops that they're raising and the coffee that they're actually creating. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick and just kind of show you guys just a few pictures just to kind of get an idea of kind of what's out there. This is actually a picture of just me in Ethiopia with a cooperative called Biftu Gudina, who we've bought from for several years. They're excited to host us. They're excited to see us when we get out there because we're a buyer for them. We're helping to support them by buying their product. But realistically, this is a cooperative that's being run. It's people that, their coffee for them is a cash crop. It's their sustenance. They're happy to see us. This is another shot from Ethiopia just to kind of show you the scale of kind of what's going on in these coffee producing countries. This is a warehouse where they're actually sorting coffee. So they're actually going through a final product just before it ships to pull out defects. Coffee is a very hands-on product. There's a lot of things that happen before that coffee even actually gets to the States. We talk a lot about the fact that coffee passes through literally hundreds of hands before it actually gets here for us to roast. And you can see in this room alone, there's 100 hands for sure. And that's only a small part of the supply chain right there. This is Timothy. Timothy is at a farm in Kenya called the Jeanette Estate. I've actually been trying to buy from Timothy for a few years, but unfortunately, kind of the way that the Kenyan coffee buying system operates, it's not always the easiest thing. You would think that it would be easy just to walk into a country and meet a farmer and work with an exporter and importer and buy that coffee's farmer, but it's not always that easy. One cool thing about Timothy, and the reason why I wanted to bring this up, is that, you know, there are a lot of farmers that are also very environmentally conscious about how their farms interact with the environment. Sorry about that. My wife just took my older daughter down to the bus stop, so we hoped my younger daughter would sleep through that, but apparently she has not. So I won't show you a picture, but right now she's in a diaper behind me with a cape on. So, but coming back to Jeanette, you know, Timothy's done a really great job of building this farm, and one of the coolest things is that he reclaims all of his water, which he then uses and actually treats so that he can reuse it for both drinking water and for septic systems and for also even processing coffee. He actually has a methane reclamation system where when he actually is composting his spent coffee cherry, he actually reclaims the methane and then he actually burns that to heat his living quarters there, which again is pretty cool. You can kind of see the water tanks up there at the top of this particular picture. He's really concerned, and we run across a lot of farmers that are concerned about kind of sustainability and in the way that they interact with their environment, because we are seeing a lot of climate change that's having a pretty severe impact on coffee. One of the biggest things, this is another producer that we work with in Colombia, Rodrigo Sanchez. We've been working with him for 6 years now. Just to kind of give you an idea, this is a drying, kind of a covered drying patio or drying building that he's kind of standing in. You can see that coffee, what's on the floor there is actually coffee that's actually drying after it's been picked and processed. So it's drying down to a uniform moisture content to get ready to ship it from Colombia to the States. But you know, going back to climate change, and one of the things is a lot of times when we talk about climate change, it's difficult for us to kind of see those immediate impacts within our own environment. You know, sure, we hear about the fact that, you know, the average temperature is up a couple of degrees. Maybe we get a couple of stronger storms. But when it comes to coffee, the impacts that we see are more significant and they're more immediate. And in a lot of ways, you know, our farmers are the ones that are actually suffering right now from this climate change. One thing I think that people don't realize about coffee is that coffee is a very fragile plant. I'm actually going to turn off screen sharing just so I can see the comments to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So, oh, cool. Okay, I've got a few to answer. We'll get through this, but you know, coffee can only survive between temperatures of about 60 degrees Fahrenheit and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So once you get beyond those temperatures, coffee will not survive, coffee will not thrive, and will not produce. And if you think about it, 60 degrees to 80 degrees is a really narrow range. And the only place that happens is at high elevation and tropical areas, which is why coffee is typically grown around areas near the equator. With climate change, what we're seeing is they're seeing larger temperature swings on their farms, and they're starting to get outside of that normal range. And we're finding that the areas of just the earth in general that are appropriate for growing coffee are starting to shrink. You know, in a lot of ways, this won't affect the specialty coffee industry as much as I think it will others, because specialty coffee is, you know, we're used to paying a little bit higher prices and sustainable prices for our coffee. But I think where it will affect is, you know, the coffee that you're able to buy for $1 a cup. You know, the coffee that's sitting on most of your supermarket shelves. You know, that coffee is coming from areas that are being affected by climate change and that are going to be able to, well, they will eventually stop producing coffee. And so I think that idea of inexpensive, cheap coffee is eventually going to go away, and probably a lot sooner than most people realize. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind as we move forward here, that that's going to be one pretty immediate impact. So something to think about. All right. How has the pandemic affected your sources? That's actually a great question. The biggest way that the pandemic has affected our sources isn't so much the quality of coffee, but a lot of it has to do with relationships. One of the things that we do, and one of the reasons why we travel for coffee purchasing, isn't so much to try to go down and find great coffees. Like, we know where there's good coffees, and there are some roasters that do that, but more than anything else, it's to solidify and develop relationships. Unfortunately, this year, because of the pandemic, we were not able to travel at all. And in fact, most of my producers don't even want to see us next year either. So there's probably a good chance that we won't actually do any more traveling until 2022, or maybe the end of 2021. So that's been a big change. I've had a Zoom calls with a lot of producers, which have been fine. But it's not my favorite thing. I'd rather be in person. I'd rather be able to see them and see the farm and kind of see what's going on. But that's kind of one of those things where it is what it is, and we just do the best we can. In terms of volume, it depends totally. There are some farms that are literally, a half acre or less. People that are only producing a couple 100 pounds of coffee. Maybe they're selling to a local mill, maybe they're selling to a local cooperative or a member of a local cooperative. So there could be very, very small farms. The only thing about small farms is that usually the volume is small enough that they aren't able to kind of keep that coffee separate. And so you wouldn't see that farm name on a particular offering. There are economies of scale when it comes to processing coffee. And so usually there's kind of a minimum farm size or a minimum lot size that's required in order to keep that coffee separate. Most farmers that we deal with are going to be somewhere between an acre and 10 acres, 15 acres. There's a few exceptions. There are definitely coffee farms out there, especially from older families that are multi-generational, where they could easily be 100 to 200 acres. There's also farms, especially in Brazil and some other areas, where they could literally be thousands of acres, similar to some of the size of the farms that you see here in the States. So it's really kind of different. Sometimes we'll have farmers, and we talk about volumes in terms of bags of coffee. So a bag of coffee could be anything between 130 to 150 pounds of green coffee. So in terms of actual volume, there's some farms that might only produce a couple bags of coffee, but there are some farmers who might produce literally tens of containers of coffee, and a container of coffee is 32,500 pounds. So yeah, I mean, they literally could produce 500,000 pounds of coffee a year. So the volumes can get pretty significant. Typically speaking, just from our philosophy, I feel like once you get to that size, you're losing a little bit of the kind of romanticism behind coffee, and that idea that you're kind of caring for a particular crop, and really focused on quality. So most of the farms that we buy from aren't much bigger than maybe 100 acres at max. What is the biggest problem the coffee industry at large is facing, and craft boutique? So the industry at large, probably, honestly, it's climate change. We're managing with it now. That's part of it. But I have a feeling it will get worse over the next 5 to 10 years. The other thing that we're dealing with is sustainability. Traditionally, specialty coffee has been tied to the C market, which is a futures market for commodity grade coffee. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with ICE or with ICE futures, but the C market essentially is a commodity price, kind of like pork bellies or corn or something like that, and it's been hovering around $1 to $1.25 a pound since like the 70s. It hasn't moved, and because of that, commodity coffee is cheap, and that's not at least changing right now. I think it will change in the next 5 to 10 years, but the problem is that for most farmers who aren't in specialty, it's really difficult to create a sustainable industry. The nice thing is that specialty coffee has moved away from using the C market as a base for how much we pay. And we've moved away, and we're kind of more of a moving away from that commodity and just basically buying coffees based upon what it's costing a farmer to actually produce it. So, a farmer will come to us and they'll be like, here's what I want for my coffee. And we'll talk about it, and we'll make a decision whether we think it represents good value. Our goal is not to ever undercut a farmer or to pay him less than what, or her less than what, it actually costs them to produce that coffee, for sure. I mean, the industry is not going to be sustainable if people aren't even making enough to cover their costs. So that's, I think, another thing where that sustainability factor, that price that people are paying for coffee comes into play. In terms of retail, especially with craft coffee, in some ways we're actually doing okay. There's still a lot of market available for specialty coffee. There's still a lot of places that don't have a good coffee house available locally. So there's room for expansion there. In addition, COVID was tough, but it's not the same for coffee houses as it is for restaurants. For restaurants, they make their money via dine-in. Even the restaurants that you've seen that have kind of pivoted to more carry-out, more takeout, online orders, they're maybe doing 25% of what they were doing before, 40, 35%, 50% of what they were doing before, and it's not sustainable for them. The nice thing about coffee is that our industry is built upon this kind of carry-out concept. So even places that have a lot of dine-in, typically speaking, 65 to 75% of their business is actually carry out anyway. And so for us, yes, our numbers across the board are down for the most part, but not to the extent that you would see in the restaurant. So, people ask me, how are things going? How are we doing? I tell people, we're treading water. We're not losing money on the retail side, and we're not making a lot of money, but we're just kind of waiting for the end of this kind of pandemic. One interesting thing is that because of COVID, we've also seen this kind of pivot towards more drive-throughs. We do have one store that has a drive-through out in Newark, and honestly, that store is up. It's our only store that's actually up right now. And so we're actually seeing a lot more interest, even from people who are really focused on the quality side of coffee in drive-throughs and actually opening up drive-throughs. So that's something where, Starbucks started moving to that model really back in 2012, 2014. They made a conscious decision to stop opening up stores that did not have drive-throughs. And now I actually think you're seeing the rest of the industry kind of move towards that as well. How will the civil war in Ethiopia affect the farmers you work with there? For the most part, not significantly. There's going to be some effect on supply chain and logistics. One interesting thing, I think, and one nice thing is that, when we buy coffees, where we're buying coffees from is typically more rural areas. And we have good relationships with everybody throughout that supply chain because we've been buying from them for a long period of time. I think I will tell you this year, we saw no blips on the radar. All of Ethiopia's crops have been shipped for this year. They're all pretty much gone at this point. We saw some issues with some climate problems there in terms of shipping. Things got a little bit rainy during shipping, and so we saw some fading of coffees and some coffees that came in not tasting as good as they should have. But it wasn't related to civil war. It was really related more to climate out there for that particular time period. Am I a proponent of coffee pods? I mean, it depends on what you want. I mean, if you want something that's super convenient and and if it tastes good to you, I'd say go for it. It's still drinking coffee. I'm not the kind of person that's going to be like, well, if you're not making it absolutely the best, that you possibly can, and grinding fresh and spending thousands of dollars on coffee equipment for your house, well, shame on you. I mean, that's not what I'm going to be. One of the core tenets of kind of our thought process and our philosophy is that people drink coffee because they like it. And they like it because it tastes good or it makes them feel good in the morning. And so I encourage you to kind of, drink coffee the way you want to drink it. If the choice for you is to drink coffee out of a pod versus not drinking coffee, then drink coffee out of a pod. I think a lot of times people do tend to gravitate more towards, a fresh grind and a good brewer. But that's only because they kind of start to have their eyes open to kind of what coffee can be and what coffee can taste like. But I don't think there's any wrong way necessarily to drink coffee. At the end of the day, it's coffee. I mean, you should drink it because you like it. And if that's how you like it, drink it that way. Nothing wrong with that. Is there a future for small coffee growers? Yes, yeah, there absolutely is. And the reason being is that I think small growers have the ability to produce higher quality coffees than large growers. If coffee was a commodity where basically, all coffee is the same and it's just however much you can grow is how much money you can make, then I'd probably say there isn't, but that's not the case. What we find is that small coffee growers have the ability to really focus on quality and actually elevate the score of their coffee, and be able to get a much higher price for that coffee and make it economically viable. You know, a lot of what our exporter partners do in different countries is it's find markets for growers that are doing a good job. There's lots of coffee out there that's really good. A lot of it is making those connections between buyer and seller. But there is absolutely a future for small coffee farmers, especially, and again, coming back to this whole climate change thing is, you know, there's not ever going to be no coffee being grown, but as there's smaller amounts of coffee being grown, or at least of high quality coffee being grown, the prices that people need to pay for those are going to go up. And I don't see that changing. There's enough of a market. There's enough of people who are really excited about really good coffee, that I think there will always be people willing to pay dollars for good coffee. Consolidation, not so much, at least not that I've heard of. We even have some farmers that have even just recently bought land and started planting their own coffee. We aren't seeing kind of farmers kind of snap up land and actually just create larger farms. There is probably some economic viability to that, but that's not something that I've typically seen so far. Does government corruption in your source countries affect your business? Yes. It's getting better. The biggest issue that we found, and it's not so much government as it is organizational, but we definitely have had some issues, especially out of Ethiopia in particular. So Ethiopia is slowly moving away from sort of an antiquated supply chain system. But what used to happen is that cooperatives would actually have to join what was called a society. And then that society would then actually export the coffee and find buyers for those particular coffees. Theoretically, cooperatives had final say in who their coffee was being sold to. But in practice, it didn't always happen. So I've had several instances, and if you remember, like me talking about trying to buy coffee from a farmer, you know, I've had several instances where we had an agreement with a cooperative to buy coffee, and then we found out later on that society that the cooperative was a member of sold the coffee to somebody else without the cooperative's permission. And at that point, there was no remediation because that coffee was gone. It had left the country. It was on a container, on a ship, moving out to some other place. So yeah, we do see. Now, the good news is we are moving away from that corruption. And we are seeing a little bit more openness in terms of how things run. And I think a lot of that has to do with the pressure from specialty buyers. Like, we want to see transparency. We want to understand where dollars are going. So like when I go in and, you know, if I'm asking a cooperative or if I'm asking a farmer society about, you know, okay, well, where's this money going? You know, and you know, they start hemming and hawing. I mean, they understand that that's a problem. And so, you know, that pressure is starting to get people to kind of change that. Fair trade. Fair trade is an interesting proposition. So fair trade started down in Peru. The idea behind fair trade was to essentially guarantee a minimum floor price for coffee to a cooperative. And in a lot of ways, it kind of works, but it also doesn't really work. The problem with fair trade more than anything else, and there's a lot of good things, so keep that in mind too, but the problem with fair trade is there isn't necessarily a quality component to fair trade. So essentially the way that a cooperative works is they say, okay, if you bring your coffee to us and it has X number of defects or less, then we're going to buy the coffee, or you're going to get your money for this coffee, and everything's going to be good. So, you know, instead of having farmers aim to produce the best coffee that they possibly can, they're reaching for this minimum threshold. And the problem is, you know, you might think, well, there's probably a lot of farmers out there who are going to go above and beyond just because they care about what they're doing. And yeah, there probably are a couple, but the problem is for the most part, they aren't seeing a premium for that hard work. And their coffee is being blended together with all of their neighbors who didn't try as hard as they did. And so you can see that typically leads to, you know, farmers kind of reaching for this minimum quality level and not really going above and beyond. So that's traditionally been the limitation of fair trade. One of the things that we've seen is that fair trade cooperatives are starting to actually pay some premiums depending upon actual cup score for coffee as it's delivered from their members. And the other thing that they're doing is they're actually, if they have cup scores that are exceptional, they'll actually keep those farmers' coffees separate and actually sell them as separate lots. So in the past, you weren't able to do that. You weren't able to buy individual farmers' coffees from a fair trade cooperative. But now we're starting to be able to see that. And some of the best coffees we've had over the last 3 or 4 years have been, those types of coffees. So it's a single producer coffee that's a member of a fair trade cooperative. So I think there's some room there. The nice thing about fair trade is there is a lot of documentation. There's a lot of certification. The other nice thing is that for fair trade, they can get organic certification for their members at a much lower cost per farmer than an individual farmer is able to. So I think that's a positive. Most of the farms that we buy from actually would qualify as organic, but very few of them are actually certified. Just because the costs of certifying an individual farm without any ties to a cooperative are just there, doesn't make sense from a financial standpoint for a farmer to do that. The cost for them isn't going to get them enough additional revenue from their coffee to make it worth it. How soon should fresh roasted coffee beans be consumed? So it depends on the roaster. So one of the things that we've actually started to find out is that how coffee ages is also dependent upon what type of roaster was used. So we use a roaster that's called a Loring. I highly recommend looking it up. They're really cool roasters. If you really want to geek out, take a look at a Loring. But it's a relatively gentle roasting process, and because of that, our coffee, it should be consumed somewhere between 6 and 40 days off of roast, and that's assuming that it's whole bean. You actually don't want to drink it before 6 to 7 days off of roast because it's actually too fresh, and I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like if I go in my own shop and I'm grabbing a pouch of coffee for home use, I'm looking for anything that's about 2 weeks out of roast. So I'm not trying to find the best or the freshest coffee on the shelf. I'm literally looking for something that's about 2 weeks. 14 days to 20 days off of roast is when that coffee is actually going to taste best, at least from us. On the flip side, 40 days, once it gets to about 40 days, it's not so much that coffee goes it goes bad. Coffee is not going to oxidize until you get to at least a year, probably more like 2 or 3 years. So coffee is never going to go bad per se, but what you are doing is it's going to go less good. So you're going to lose a lot of the volatile aromatics, the things that make coffee taste and smell like coffee. A lot of times when we have stale coffee, we'll talk about it tasting flat. And what we mean by that is the flavors are mostly there, but it's losing all of that aromatics and it just doesn't smell like a lot. And that's where coffee goes stale. Once you grind coffee, coffee goes stale in about 15, 20 minutes. So, being able to grind at home is definitely preferable, only because you are going to end up having those aromatics actually in the cup when you brew, as opposed to losing them as it just sits there and goes stale. How many times a year are coffee beans produced? So it depends on the country. For the most part, coffee is a once-a-year crop. So on a typical farm, what happens is you have a dormant period of about 3 months. Where it's dry and they do a lot of kind of farm maintenance. And then you'll have the rainy season that starts, which causes a mass blooming or flowering on the plantation. Those flowers end up getting pollinated, and then each flower will actually turn into a cherry. And from that point on, it actually takes about 8 months for those cherries to fully ripen. So it's a long time. Once those cherries are ripened, they're actually picked by hand. And then processed, and that picking season or that harvest season usually runs about a month on a given farm, and then we move back into about a 3-month dry period. There are some farms that will have what's called a fly crop, and basically they're very close to the equator, so we'll see them in Ecuador, in Colombia, some in Brazil, any country that's kind of right along the equator there. So you will see actually essentially the same process happens. It's just basically half the trees in the farm, or more than half the trees in the farm, will be on one cycle, where the other trees in the farm will be on this kind of other cycle that's kind of 6 months opposite. So Notice it was all women sorting the coffee beans. That's actually one question I don't know. How much are they being paid by hour? I can find out. I'll let you guys know. To be honest with you, I don't know. That is typically a city job. So I believe that picture was actually in Jimma, which is in Western Ethiopia. Typically the wages that are being paid in the city for that type of processing out of that dry mill are usually pretty good. The reason they're good is because dry mills are typically processing a whole lot of coffee all at once. And so there's economies of scale that happen there. The other thing to remember is that those jobs are also seasonal. So the people that are working there probably have other jobs that they're also doing during the rest of the season. Yes, it was all women there, for sure. And there is still a pretty big division of labor from a male and female perspective in a lot of coffee countries. And a lot of that just has to do with culture and background of those countries and kind of where they're at. We're starting to see some of those barriers broken, especially in Central and South America, where there's a much greater matriarchal type of society. Women do have the same kind of rights of ownership as men do, and we do actually source coffee from a lot of female farmers, especially in the cooperatives that we buy from. But especially in places like in Africa and Ethiopia particularly, we do see still a big division of labor between men and women, and a lot of that does stem from culture. I'd have to look. I've not run across a farm that's actually owned by a female in Ethiopia. And I think that relates, there may be some governmental regulations there, to be honest with you. But I think that mostly just relates to culture. How much coffee is produced from one tree? That's a great question. I think in terms of quintales or acres, I have to do the math real quick here. I want to say one tree is going to be able to produce a finished product somewhere around 2 to 5 pounds of coffee, depending upon the variety. So within coffee, there's different varieties. They're all, typically we are buying all coffees that are Arabica. So Arabica would be the species of coffee. But then within that species, there's a bunch of different varieties, kind of similar to what you would see in apples, right? Or something like that, where you've got your Gala, you've got your Crips Pink Lady, you've got your Honeycrisp. You've got the same kind of concept in coffee. So we've got, Bourbon and Typica and Pacamara and SL28 and all kinds of different ones. And every tree is a little bit different in terms of how it's structured, how tall it is, how short it is, how bushy it is, how the cherries are actually spaced on the branches, how many branches are coming off the trunk. So there's a lot of variety there, but I would say 2 to 5 pounds is a pretty good number in terms of how much finished product the tree is each tree is actually producing. One interesting thing about coffee is that coffee obviously comes from a wild plant, and there still are wild coffee trees across the world. If you don't prune a coffee tree and you actually just let it grow wild, it will eventually get to about 18 to 20 feet tall. And one cool thing is that for the most part, the branches on that lower section will all eventually fall off, and it just really creates this kind of canopy. So if you actually ever walk through like a coffee forest, a wild coffee forest, it's kind of surreal because you see all these trunks going up, and you've got this canopy of leaves, but there's literally no undergrowth because that canopy is super thick. And so it's kind of like almost like walking through a cave or walking in a tunnel of some sort. The other thing about coffee, and the reason why there's no undergrowth, is because coffee is actually a broadleaf evergreen. So coffee never loses its leaves, but unlike kind of the evergreens that we're used to here, they're not needles, they're actually broadleaves, kind of like holly. That's really the only, holly and boxwoods, I think, are the only broadleaf evergreens I think that we have up here in the States. When did I start drinking coffee? Well, that's a great question. My first coffee experience was, I think I was maybe, I don't know, 9 or 10. Somebody had a can of International Delight French vanilla instant coffee at, I think, one of our holiday parties. And I very vividly remember tasting that and thinking that it just tasted like burnt water. And that was not delicious. I kind of eventually moved forward, I suppose. In college, I went to college at Miami University. There used to be a coffee house there called The Buzz. And I remember upstairs they had basically it was 2 levels, and upstairs they had a giant open room, and they had these kind of like living room furniture sets that were all just kind of set throughout this entire big, huge room with 20-foot ceilings. And I remember being up there at 2, 3 in the morning, drinking whatever flavored coffee they had available with a bunch of cream and sugar in it, and just studying and getting work done. And it was also not very good, definitely caffeine driven. But then what actually got me to love coffee was my last year of college. My dad called me up one day and asked if I wanted to buy a coffee house. And this was totally out of the blue. And I was a creative writing major at the time, so my career prospects were relatively limited. And I thought that this sounded like a great idea. I knew nothing really about coffee at that point, but I left school early, a semester early. I'm still a semester short of graduating after 20 years. At some point I'll go back. But came home to Granville, and we bought the River Road Coffee House in Granville. I ended up working there and managing that store for a year with no salary. And that was kind of my buy-in. So I lived at home with my parents for that year and just worked my butt off and made no money. But I ended up owning 50% of that at the end of that year. And since then, we've just kind of grown. And the good news is I've obviously developed a passion for that coffee. And so it's been a great learning experience for me and just this kind of amazing journey. And now I can't imagine doing anything else.
Dave, we're going to have to bring your speech to a close. However, if you could stick around after, we have more of an informal time after we close to answer some additional questions and chat with a club on more of an informal basis. So I'd appreciate if you could stick around. Next week's program, and an excellent program, by the way. I never had any idea the complexities of the coffee industry, and you're part of a fascinating business.
Well, thank you.
Major coffee lover, as my family will attest, and grind my own. But now you're suggesting I can go to a whole new level, and I appreciate it. And now, next week, we will hear from Cheryl Ottenberg, and she will be discussing issues related to Alzheimer's. So I ask all of you to think about your friends and other folks that you might like to invite to the meeting. We've had a lot of excellent speakers, like Dave this morning, and I've gotten a lot of comments that we should be kind of promoting people getting online with us. So as we end the meeting today, if I could have the 4-way test come up. Okay. Oh, again, I will mention, and maybe Steve, after we do the 4-way test, can show in the chat, we did have the link to the Poinsettia program. Okay, and I'd like others to join in as now before we adjourn, of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second,
is it fair for all concerned?
Third,
will it build goodwill and better
friendships? Fourth,
will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Again, I want to thank everyone for attending this morning. It was an excellent meeting. Please remember to sign up for the November 21st collections, both at the Dublin and Worthington pantries. And here's the form for you to look at. that you will be receiving a link to this form. It is also in today's chat room. And as Mark Beaver has been indicated on there of selling, you just simply fill in the column and total it up. At the week that we close on December 1st, we will in fact ask you to confirm all of those by getting back on the link. So again, poinsettia sales are going to be done over the internet. Pickup will be on December 2nd. So, or December 9th, I'm sorry. December 2nd, we'll put in the order on December 9th. We will have pickup at Steve Paralee's office. So again, back to the end of the meeting. So I will adjourn at this point. You will also receive a email on the auction. So thank you very much for attending. And for those who want to continue with an informal conversation, both with Dave and the rest of the club, you can remain online. Thank you very much.